Go.
Streaming from South Africa to the world. This is the Stonks Go Moon podcast. What just happened? We break it down so you don't have to.
Welcome everyone to the Stonks Go Moon podcast. My guest today, Darren Lee, project manager, wealth and trading at Revolut. Darren, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Happy to be back once again.
My
this is our fourth podcast.
My favorite person to talk tech to in the world at the moment.
To talk trash to, essentially.
Tech is trash. I love that. Listen, let's talk Facebook. Facebook's been in the news for all the wrong reasons. It seems whistleblowing. It's going on for years now. I just looked at the stock price this morning, down 8% in the last 5 days. Yeah. But people forget, year to date, still up 16%. If you go further back, 5 years, up 137%. And since inception, up 716%. Kind of puts what happens this week into perspective. But do you think Facebook is dead?
It's interesting because Facebook, its main app is dead for a young generation. Like I'm a 25-year-old dude. Like I'm not going on there talking about my trials and tribulations on a regular basis. But Instagram is a revolving machine, and it's essentially it's always continuously growing, coming out with new features. Everyone of my generation are stuck to it. Like literally can't take away from it, you know? So it's like as if there's two separate entities, even though they're not. They could be on an internal basis, but like really the Facebook that we see and we're using, you know, I don't go on there to post a status, whereas like people live in the detail of Instagram, which is crazy because people think like it's getting, you know, it's falling apart. And in retrospect, there's some things. Yeah, just in retrospect, there are some things that are coming back. But this is what happens when it becomes such a big, huge machine. And that's why, like, when you look towards like the metaverse, a lot of the stuff I was looking at recently was the fact that, you know, okay, back in the 80s and the 90s, it was the internet, whereas this is like the metaverse, and it's as if it's a new term, which it technically is. Exactly, but what's interesting is that this has been going on for quite some time through gaming, through Twitch, through online dating, which is really interesting. And now what's really cool is the fact that, you know, Facebook owns Oculus, and Oculus has been at the front from this, from an AR and VR perspective. So this is like a natural kind of like cycle. And I looked at, you know, they're looking at budgets of between like 1 to 10 billion over the next 8 years.
Zuck wants to build the metaverse. But my question is, does the real world suck that much, right? That we feel this need for escapism, that we need to go somewhere else into the digital world where we can live literally like a separate life.
We already do it though. That's the thing.
Yeah, but that's this thing here.
Exactly.
So
his approach is to replace it.
So according to me, we're already in the metaverse because you have an avatar, you spend time here every single second of the day that your eyes are on that screen. You are not in reality, right? Have you ever tried to chat to someone who's on their phone? You go like, hello, hello, hello. They don't respond. It's because your brain literally shuts off to the real world. So in matter of fact, we could already be in a sort of a metaverse.
You're forgetting one part is the touch and feel element. Like that's what we don't have through an iPhone, and that was one of their main objectives, is the fact that, you know, you don't have. They wanted to like replace an iPhone to the point that we have these like touch and feel elements, which is what's in VR, and you know that's where it's going to go down a dark path. And they see gaming and dating to be like the main points here, which is crazy to think of, and especially because like how it's going to be built, it's going to appeal to our senses, to our short-term dopamine effects versus like any sort of long-term impact. So even though we are highly like engaged on Instagram and engaged in our apps, we still have a disconnected feeling. And that was the whole thing about, you know, the pandemic, is that we don't have the same touch and feel anymore. Whereas now, if you do have this, it's an enhanced experience. And that's what makes it so funny, because like, no matter if you're designing a $1 billion company or it's a small little startup or a small little company, it's all about customer experience. and it doesn't matter how big or small. So if we can do this in a virtual world and make it even better for people, well, then why would you not want to go down that path from an investor perspective, from a business perspective, and just from a general individual perspective?
That makes sense, because I think what you're referring to is sort of haptic feedback, where there's, if you're playing games and someone shoots you, you feel it through the controller. So basically, even a funny thing is when I use my phone and I touch the screen, you know what I mean, is that you get that sensation of the buzzing that comes through. When it's off, it almost feels unnatural. So it's just acceleration of that whole thing.
Yeah, it almost feels like you're just touching glass. And that's what
but now this is the weird thing, because sex sells, and I can see sort of the path this thing is going down, and it's going down a very dark path.
100%. But again, it's going to be like the early entry point.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, like a lot of those like online, like actual like sex websites led the way to credit cards in the 90s.
Yeah.
And that's a genuine fact. It was the first time that they started integrating this stuff online. So that could be like essentially like your entry point, and then it will develop continuously from there. We'll have houses being sold through VR. We'll have cars being tested through it. You know, as in. But if you look at VR right now, it actually sucks. Like I used to do interviews in VR. Would you believe? That was an actual thing, and like it looked terrible. It felt terrible, and we all knew that we were just in an office doing it.
Yeah,
you know, it didn't make sense.
Like Facebook workspaces, So that's an interesting jumping off point, because it feels to me like tech companies, they all want to force us into a room together at the same time, right? So this is this big debate around scheduling content versus content on demand. Like I personally want to choose when I want to consume content. But I mean, Amazon just come out with this feature where it's sort of going to be like a DJ room, or you get together in one room and one person can play music. And I'm not sure this road that they're going down is the correct one. I mean, you also see Facebook with the groups coming in with this sort of a Clubhouse function. Clubhouse is not what it was. Spotify Green Room, not what it was or what it was envisaged to be. What's your take in terms of the tech and the landscape between like scheduled and on demand?
We're definitely still at a very early infant stage for a lot of this stuff. Like no one has cracked being able to do things live for the normal person. Obviously we have Twitch and stuff for gaming that's really, really high end. And it works great. But I suppose that's a whole like universe. Whereas for people like me and you, we want to essentially watch, listen, and consume stuff when we get the opportunity, which is why people listen to my podcasts that are 6 months old, and they'll message me saying, I listened to something that literally happened last year, because they had their own time to do it. You can only really do this on demand. So essentially like on the go, when you have a high level of influence. When Clubhouse was moving quite well, people like Lex Friedman, Joe Rogan, Andrew Huberman were able to hop on and be able to move crowds and fill out rooms without in seconds, right? But for the average person, it won't work. From a DJ perspective, I actually have seen those actual apps start years ago. Would you believe that we'd all essentially hop on an app and we'd share music, and then it would go around as if it's like a shuffle. That will work again, possibly for a DJ when they have a high level of influence. So it all depends on that, and also depends on like the actual time of consumption. Like I've seen people run Clubhouse events or live events in the middle of the day, and it just doesn't like fit me. And then I see people who run them at night, and it's like it doesn't fit me for a different reason. So it depends how much I want to get pulled into it. You know, if I see a webinar, Simon Rhea essentially would run webinars quite regularly. He'll fit them into a time which I would nearly be more inclined to jump and listen to, just because I know, like, and trust him. So and that's at a very, very basic level, and something that me and you both know. But I think when you get to the larger scale, it becomes a numbers game. Just like a lot of things, it just becomes a numbers game.
I think for me, that's missing is on a lot of these platforms as well, is curated content. And the fact that nothing seems to be indexed, so I can't search for it.
100%. So I just spoke with someone, Darren Lee, last week. We literally had like a 4-hour conversation about this, how the next wave of information online is going to be ultra short form content. And I mean like rapid fire TikTok, but filtered. And what I mean by this is that you'll get onto something like YouTube and you'll go into even things like finance, investing, markets, NYSE, NASDAQ. You can go as granular like that. And then you'll get Bloomberg, all this like Wall Street Journal, start banging you out short form content that you can learn on demand. That's where I see the actual next wave of information. For someone who's a podcaster, we can pull you elsewhere.
That's $1 trillion industry just waiting to happen just there. That's actually very good. That was a good conversation.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's that complicated as well.
No.
Like, that isn't that complicated. Like, Instagram's algos already work in that fashion. If you go onto your Explore feed, I'll just get hit with a shitload of gym stuff, a shitload of like investing stuff, and then a shitload of like traveling stuff, usually. But that comes to me in kind of like an all or nothing approach, which is kind of what Instagram wants you to do. But for someone who's like yourself, like myself, who wants things to be a bit more organized. And there's other platforms as well that do that really well, but they just don't have the traction as the big boys, essentially.
Yeah. Before I let you go, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is you work remotely, right? So you work from home on a permanent basis.
Correct.
So how do you build and keep that social cohesion, which a typical pre-COVID environment would have, where there's a team and there are different dynamics and the performance, and you would go out for a beer or you would have water cooler talk. How does that work for you guys?
I think it's really interesting because I take this from two perspectives. So firstly, I think I joined Revolut during COVID, during like all lockdown, whatever. And for me, I actually had a conversation about this yesterday. It's benefited me dramatically, I think, because what this forced me to do was do the short 15-minute conversations. Yeah. Because you can go wide in a company by being remote. And this is what's really interesting. People don't see this. You can get to the head of finance, the head of operations, the head of trading, the head of HR within seconds on Slack. And you can put in these short 15-minute conversations. That gives you reach. Then it's up to you to get depth. When you get depth, then essentially you're just reconnecting with people on an ongoing basis. You obviously don't have like the extreme levels of depth of you going through difficult moments and then going out and enjoying it and celebrating it. But I think once those teams are pretty well connected, and I think a lot of people do this in a good way, from like doing daily huddles, daily stand-ups, doing one-to-one meetings. And that's the biggest thing for me, is that like, I think as I'm getting like busier, and I hate like that busy train, I'm trying to always like reconnect with people that are, even from a university or even from other companies, and just trying to do it regularly. But there's also another interesting point on this that I wanted to bring up. So people think that like, culture and stuff like this equals like productivity, and it does to a certain level. But you may be familiar with Dan Price. He's the kind of like
poster child for for anti-corporateness, I think.
Exactly. So I just want to read out this post from yesterday. So he put up, this was just last night. Yeah. He was saying, I'm CEO of a company that works remotely the last 18 months. Since then, we hit record revenue and staff count. I've asked my staff where they wanted to work. 7% wanted to go back to the office. 62% wanted to work at home full-time, and 31% wanted hybrid. So he said, great, do whatever you want, because productivity doesn't come from pizza parties. It comes from happy employees. And that's the biggest kicker for me. Like, that just says it all, because what that means is that, at the end of the day, work equals work. You can enjoy it in different ways. And what satisfies you is different than what satisfies me. And that's just 100% it, I have another kind of life outside of my career life, which is kind of in health and fitness. And that's what I do a lot. Often when I was in other companies, I didn't want to be in a bar at fucking 9 o'clock on a Friday, on a Thursday night, because it just would wreck my schedule. There's someone else
gives you a different level of flexibility, I guess.
Exactly. And then you can come and go as you will, like, as in, if you want to go meet up with people, you can. Now, obviously, we're kind of like nearly out of the woods with COVID. So we have the opportunity to go for coffees and things like this, which you want to do. This is what you want to do as well. But I think having it as such a black or white approach is just so like dinosaur traditional vibes. Yes. And for people that are young and want like additional layers to their life, it'll be very difficult to keep people to say, you need to sit here for this amount of time. You need to show me something, because that's not how it works. Like, as in, I might log on really early, like really early, like 6, 7 a.m. Check a few things, go to the gym, come back, and then in the night, then I might do another kind of like refresh.
Listen, man, I spoke to someone last week in an offline conversation, and they're local, based in South Africa. So on our timeline, SASD, they work a certain amount of hours for a company, which I can't name. And then when that company sort of dies down and they, the things wind up and whatever, he works for an American company in EST remotely. So I'm like, he works so hard, but the money is good. He works like when he wants, and he works from home. So I think that's brilliant. I think like this whole thing about being in an office and being confined to that space and just doing that one thing is, like you said, it's technologically, it's like a technological dinosaur. We've moved past this. It's the future now.
100%. As long as he's not breaking any policy issues.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well,
then you just go smash it. Well, it depends. If you're working in a hedge fund, you come in working at 2 different hedge funds, but you know what I mean.
But I mean, it's the same if you're picking up different shifts, like working in retail or working in a warehouse or whatever. It's the same concept.
Or having a podcast.
Yeah, well,
exactly.
There we go. Darren, if the listeners want to connect with you, where can they do that? What are your socials, and what are some of the things that you're busy with at the moment?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Darren Lee, as always. You can also find me on Spotify, Kickoff Sessions is my podcast. Find me on Instagram, Kickoff Sessions HQ, which gave me the axe recently enough. It wasn't for anything bad, but I just got cut, so I'm back on. But yeah, reach out, and I've recently started a consulting business as well, which is premium B2B consulting for podcasts, also for individuals, influencers, personal trainers to pick it up and launch their own shows. So reach out whenever for a chat, and take it from there.
And we'll put those links in the comments. Darren, thank you so much for joining us. To our listeners, peace, love, and prosperity. I'm going to catch you in the next one. Cheers.